Hello.
Hello, how are you?
Yeah, good, thank you. All ready?
We'll see. So you're the head of delivery, is that right?
No, I'm a project lead, so I think Mark's the head of deliveries in the car.
Oh, right. Cool. Hey, Rihanna.
Hi, Sean. How are you? Hi, Ben.
Good.
Hello.
I think we may as well make a start. Then, if anyone comes in afterwards, they can just sort of catch up, really. But obviously, hi everyone. Just wanted to say, obviously, a massive thank you for everyone sort of taking out the time of your day today, obviously, to take part in this webinar. So thanks to the panel, and also thanks for you that have signed up. We did have a slight change in the panel today, so just a bit of an extra thank you to Ben and Mark, who have taken the time out and have stepped up quite last minute to join the panel. So thank you to both of you. So the outcome today really is for all of you to have the opportunity to sort of discuss Agile project delivery, what it means to us, and basically how it's hopefully going to work and how it's going to look in a post-COVID world. So the panel's made up of talented individuals in their own right to lead a discussion based on their thoughts and experiences, so that you can hopefully all leave today with something new. I know most of you have probably done quite a few webinars, so this one is going to be more the opportunity for you guys to ask the questions and the panel to lead the discussion, and you can all sort of join in when you feel like you want to bring something to the table. So just to introduce myself quickly, I'm Rihanna from Maxwell Bond. Some of you will probably already know me. Those of you who haven't had that pleasure yet, I'm just a senior recruitment consultant from Maxwell Bond. We've been established now for roughly about 3.5 years, where we've been able to really build up that good reputation for delivery of top talent across the IT around the Northwest and London. We've worked with from startups to FTSE 100s, but we're really trying to help support our community by not only helping with recruitment, but by providing added services such as things like this to add value to you as our clients, but also to you as our network. So just as a bit of a GDPR, just so that you're all aware, the webinar is going to be recorded and it will be distributed to you all at the end, but as well as to those who haven't had the opportunity to attend, but have expressed interest in our thoughts and what we're going to be speaking about. You'll also all be provided with a short survey at the end, just so that you can all automatically just provide feedback, which will be very helpful for me, as this is my first one. So anything that you can all provide for our next one would definitely be very helpful. So just as lastly from me, and hopefully you won't have to hear from me again, here's how it's going to work. So it's just mainly you guys are going to be able to ask a question and we'll build the discussion in the form of hopefully a quite a big round table. There's going to be 2 functions where you can ask the question. So you can use the raise a hand function or ask a question forum. For those that haven't used Zoom before, the raise your hand function just allows you to ask your question verbally. The Q&A setting is just text only. It's for whatever you feel comfortable with, and myself and Charlotte will also monitor this and we'll try and get through as many of these questions as we can. I know we're probably not going to get through all of them, but what we have done is in the survey, you can also put any questions in there that you've not been able to get answered, and we'll hopefully either put together a second part to this webinar if it is a success to you all, or we'll put together a PDF where we can answer them questions for you. But that's last from me. Hopefully you won't have to hear my voice again, but just throughout this webinar, just please share your thoughts, ask those questions, and hopefully we can all leave today learning something new. But I'll now hand you over to our panelists, who you all be in very capable hands, and they can all sort of introduce themselves to you so you know who's going to be taking part. But yeah, so I'll hand it over to you, Simon.
Hi, my name's Simon Naggs. I'm a project program manager. I've spent the bulk of the last sort of 10 or 15 years living in Newcastle upon Tyne and working in Canary Wharf in London in the investment banking trade, which is a pretty punishing commute and not particularly compatible with family life. So we up sticks and moved to Manchester about 18 months ago, and I'm kind of starting to get established here a little bit now. I've managed deliveries of pretty much every level, large and small, across multiple continents and time zones. Sort of organisational change, product launches, a lot of technology. I've set up and run a program management office at Morgan Stanley. I was briefly a chief operating officer for one of the MDs in Credit Suisse for about 6 months. But my first and foremost love is delivery, hands-on project management, kind of project rescue and turnaround, and increasingly in recent years, working with groups of project managers to sort of support, guide and mentor where necessary in various different techniques. I'm a huge fan of Agile Scrum, for the record. And for the last 6 weeks, I've mainly been teaching maths and English to a pair of bored 7-year-olds, which, to be honest, has probably been the most challenging one of the lot. So yeah, that's me.
Okay, thanks, Simon. I'll go next. So my name is Ben Maffin. I'm an Agile project delivery lead. I'm based in the Wirral in the Northwest. I think to describe me, I'd say if you cut me through the middle, it will probably say delivery. I've got 19 years experience specialising in enterprise software delivery over apps and web. Delivered some of ITV's biggest apps, including Love Island and I'm a Celebrity last year, but also worked on web, so delivering projects for Liverpool Football Club, Unite the Union, and Aldermore Bank. Like Simon said, I'm also an absolute Agile fan as well. So I introduced Agile into a large agency owned by Trinity Mirror about 5 years ago. And that literally changed my way of looking at project delivery. It changed my way of seeing how teams who are just working on a project together, sort of quite loosely, really came together and became a high performing team and looking at some really good outputs. So yeah, that's my background. And over to the next person.
Yeah, Mark, I'm head of delivery at Car Finance 24/7. I've been involved with projects and program management for longer than I care to admit, but initially on the military side. So I was in the army for a significant period, left the army, started doing project management and delivery at Bombardier, then moved across to a private consult company. Did project delivery for Major League Baseball, BAMTech Media, and then went on to be a senior project manager for Disney Plus. I don't know how many of you got children, there's quite a few here, but basically Disney Plus platform that people are signing up to now, I helped set up the initial consultation for making sure that could basically go globally and seamlessly. And now, as I just mentioned, I head delivery at Car Finance, so between functional and non-functional requirements, do the dance that a lot of us do between product and tech. I try and keep all the numerous projects on track, and at the end of each reporting sprint, I'm the person who basically says to the CEOs if we've delivered successfully or not, based on numerous metrics, little traps that I've set out for myself. Again, I am an advocate of Agile and Scrum, but I also like a little bit of waterfall as well, which tends to confuse people. That's me. Next speaker, please.
Hi, I'm Sean Kalman. I currently work as a Agile coach for a fairly large corporation based in Manchester and Amsterdam. My background, as you can appreciate, most coaches have quite diverse backgrounds. I started out in engineering and then quickly moved into project management and delivery, Prince 2 and ITIL. Took a couple of years out to travel and then came back into engineering about 8 years ago. And then just over a year ago, jumped back into sort of delivery in the sense of as an Agile coach. Because of my engineering background, I tend to focus most of my time with the product teams and delivering. To be fair, I have probably an emphasis on XP and working with developers, engineering practice, things like that. So yeah, my background, combination of delivery, engineering, and now coaching. So to kick things off, what we thought we would do is I'm going to post a link into the chat, which is a Google Doc, and it's going to go to everybody. If you click on that, there's an editable document on Google Docs. And what this is it's a, I've done this a couple of times with up to 50 and 60 people, coaches, as well as teams across the industry. And it's a nice non-verbal space for collaboration. And to kick things off, what I thought we would do is do a little bit of a check-in around, recognizing the situation that we're in, that most of us are not just, well, either we're furloughed or we're not just working from home, but we're sort of working under house arrest a little bit, and that we can't leave and we don't really have that choice at the minute. So I've got three questions there that I'd like you to consider and fill in. If you just put your cursor in any of the cells, you can write in them, and when you do that, it locks the cell. So 3 questions that I'd like you to think about, and just 1 sentence on each. What are you happy for at the minute? What are you sad for? And what are you thankful for? And then what we'll do is, amongst the panelists, we'll kick things off by having a bit of a discussion around some of the things that you guys have put in there. So we'll kick off with a bit of a check-in. Then we'll dive into the discussion around Agile project delivery, and discussing what does this look like at the minute? What does it look like when we come out of this under lockdown? What has changed, if anything? And then towards the end, we have sort of an end of session reflection. So we're going to try and make sure that as many people as possible get something out of this. So as we go along and discuss things, if you have an aha moment or a light bulb sort of comes on and you have a realization about something, feel free to fill that in the part 3 section of the document. And then going back to the part 2, as we discuss things, if you've got questions, you want to put them in there, put them in either the chat or the Google Doc, but also as a bit of an experiment, it's a nice collaborative approach to take notes. So if you can take notes in there based on the discussion that we have, then everyone can see your thoughts as well as what we're talking about. So let's have a look at a few. So I'll just verbalize mine straight away rather than just write them down. So things that I'm happy for. I am spending a lot more time with my family over the last 2 months. So I'm fortunate to be in a company where I haven't been furloughed. I'm working full time as a coach, coaching delivery amongst several product groups and teams. So working from home, I don't have a 2-hour commute. I've got more time in my day. I'm spending more time with my wife and kids. We have lunch together. We wouldn't do that if I was in the office in the city. So that's something I'm quite happy for. Something I'm sad for. Fortunately, we haven't had, we haven't experienced the virus at all, but I do know quite a few people that have, and I do know some people that have lost loved ones to the virus, and including in one case where a gentleman lost both of his parents within a few hours of each other at a hospital. So that's the one thing I'm sad for. And then the one thing I'm thankful for, similar to what I'm happy for, is the opportunity, I think, that I've got as a coach to learn new skills in doing this remotely. So if given the choice, I don't think I'd ever choose to coach a team remotely, because it's very difficult to observe things like human behavior. It feels like you're flying a plane in the midst of a storm where you can't see anything, and all you've got is the data and the controls in front of you. And what started out for me as a bit of a question mark around how possible is this to do as a coach remotely, I think it's turned into an opportunity that I'm quite thankful for. So that's me. What about some of the other guys on the panel?
I mean, it looks like an overwhelming happiness for people's work-life balance in terms of the amount of time that they're spending with their families. And I know from my perspective, commuting and working long hours, going to work, and that really affects relationships. So I think potentially a real positive is if people can work remotely now and spend more time with their kids and their wife, that's only going to be a good thing.
Yeah, I was going to say that's a big one of mine. The big life change for us recently was to let me sort of spend more time with the kids, and now I've got as much as I possibly want. And it's definitely a double whammy with the weather, though. I'm not sure how we'd be coping if it was raining all the time. We can at least chuck him out in the back garden for a while.
Yeah, we've experienced that as well. Weirdly, the weather's been really nice. It's been spring. We live in an area that's quite leafy, where we can go for walks. And I think last week we had a bit of rain, and it just completely changed the whole atmosphere of working from home. not being able to go outside. So spending time on walks, you know, staying sane by being in the garden and doing stuff has been quite helpful for us.
Yeah. I'm kind of thinking that, especially when we're looking at sort of post-COVID, I suspect this may end up being a little bit of a longer-term change for everyone, because work life is you're being forced to find that balance. You know, people are having to educate their kids from home. You can't just shove them off with an iPad for 12 hours in a day. You've got to engage with them. So you've got to be open with your workplace about, like, look, you know, me and my wife are doing shifts looking after the kids. So I'm mainly going to be working in the morning. She's mainly going to be working in the afternoon. I think it's going on for long enough that it's quite possible we'll be doing more of that even after things are going back to normal, which could be a really big positive.
So just in terms of people working from home, and I know one of the principles of something like XP is having on-site customers or sitting together. I guess from the panel's point of view, and Mark, you know, has had a delivery, for instance, in your company. How do you think you're going to move forward in terms of letting people work remotely? Is it going to be something that you're going to do full time, or you know, 2 days a week, or not at all?
Yeah, it's an interesting observation, because beforehand we're primarily boots on the ground in the office, you know, physical presence, and you know, I could see the arguments for both remote and physical meetings. That's one of the things I've been happy with, the fact that we did demonstrate the ability that we could work remotely effectively. We did that quite seamlessly on the back of processes put in place beforehand. The way that we're going to phase it, well, the way we're going to address going back to kind of business as usual definitely needs consideration, because there's been people that have been used to working 9 till 5 in a physical office location that all of a sudden have seen the benefits of working remotely. And I do believe that we're going to phase in certainly people working, returning back to regular office hours, but also due diligence in the manner in which they're going to carry out the work. Do they need to come into the office to do their work? Do some of the meetings that we're trying to do remotely actually have to be physical presence? So there's a lot of consideration going on that side. Tempered with that, I'm a little bit, not anxious, but, you know, conscious of effective change management. I mean, I think that's going to be the key. I was on a webinar a couple of weeks ago, and somebody commented that, you know, well, we've proven that we can do change, you know, and I agree with that to some extent. Yeah, wholeheartedly, as a nation, we've proved that we can carry out major change in a short space of time. But one thing that I'm certainly going to be looking at is change fatigue, because everybody who comes back into the workplace, I'd argue, you know, has gone through a significant amount of change. And anything new that we want to introduce will need to be carefully considered, and more importantly, effectively communicated. You know, we can have the best plan in the world, but as everybody knows, no plan survives first contact with the enemy. So we're most definitely having a look at how we're going to go back to kind of business as usual.
So I'm guessing a lot of the participants might be wanting to go to their line managers and say, you know, we can prove that we can do working remotely. I guess, you know, working from maybe Sean, your coaching experience, or Simon, you know, your experience, how do you think people are going to be able to get senior management to go through that sort of Kubler-Ross change curve of people going, no, we're going back to how we were, or, you know, then eventually getting to sort of accepting it?
I think, so for us, you know, we've very much been thinking around this as not just working from home, but we are working under house arrest. So those are two very different things psychologically and mentally for teams. And I guess the crux is we don't have a choice at the minute. I know we've already had discussions at quite senior level where, yes, it does look like going back into the office, you know, assuming we do at some point sometime soon, that senior managers are going to be more accepting of teams working from home. Obviously, the difference there is that the team will have the choice to do that or not. So one thing that I've observed, though, is both before this, but as part of this experience over the last 2 months, is it's a very big difference between a team where some of you are working from home or remotely and some of you are in the office. So I think for us, it has to be a team decision. So if it's going to be effective, then maybe the team decides that, you work in the office for 4 days a week, and then on every Friday, the team works remotely, but it's their choice. And I think having that choice would be quite healthy. If you've got members of the team that are working remotely and some not, you've essentially got conflicting ways of working. And that causes problems, I think, and it isn't ideal. So for me, from my observations over the last couple of months, I think we've been quite successful at continuing delivery, doing it doing it remotely. We were quite proactive though. So we didn't want to be in a situation where somebody came into the office with the virus and then suddenly everyone was gone that night, and it was a crash course in working remotely. So we wanted a managed experience. We wanted to intentionally do things. So we preempted working from home, and probably we chose to do that as a company a few weeks before most other people, and a week or two after I think Twitter did it. So we were quite proactive, and I think that made a big difference. For us as a large corporation, we had to do that. We couldn't, it really would have been a crash landing. But I think it's worked quite well, and it's a surprise as to how much it's worked. And in terms of delivery, and even things like team health. As a coach, I will spend much more time with people individually and in one-to-ones, mentoring. And quite often, I'll ask questions that I would never have thought to ask if I was in the office. So quite often I'll start a conversation with something like, what are you doing at the minute to keep yourself sane? How are you staying connected with your family? Just kind of putting things at human level. And I think for us, yes, delivery is important, but I think the primary concern has been team health and working under this context of sort of house arrest and that first, and then sort of delivery second. And I think that's actually helped delivery a lot. We're having to be quite flexible. We've got teams where you've got kids, and yes, it's great that we get time back because we don't have that commute. But sometimes someone will have to work in the afternoons and alternate with their wives and looking after the kids, and sometimes the team will work at different hours from each other, and that's okay. And that's just something we have to kind of embrace and work with. So yeah, that's been our experience. And so to answer your question, yes, I do absolutely think we're going to be more open-minded, and I think it's probably a healthy thing. I think if you've got that context switch between working in the office and working at home, I think it's quite healthy mentally. But it has to be a choice, right? It can't be something that's forced upon us. And I think it would have to also be a team decision.
So I think there's a couple of questions covered in the chat which kind of link to this as well, to do with the sense of community. So from Simon Brown and Richard, to do with collaboration and how people that sense of community where people come together and you get to know each other, and you kind of talk about stuff over coffee when you go to the cafeteria or the kitchen. And I think just from my experience, to really good point, I delivered the I'm a Celebrity app and the Love Island app, and most of my team was offshore. So they were based in Belarus, or they were based in London, and I was based in Liverpool. And I completely empathize with these points, and that it's very difficult to get that kind of level of rapport with people when they're sort of at arm's length. And I don't know if anybody else has had that difficulty where you've got to go the extra mile to kind of go, on a Slack call, especially if someone's not got their video on and it's just on audio, and you're trying to go, how you doing? Are you going on holiday? What's the family doing? And trying to get that kind of team building. I don't know if anyone else has had that problem.
Yeah, absolutely. I was going to make that point. Is that you need to encourage kind of over communication. Exactly like yourself, I've done a lot of work with overseas teams, and as a manager, you naturally get a bit nervous when you can't see people. You can't tell if they're stressed. You can't tell if they're bored.
Yeah.
I genuinely had one once where we didn't know that our key program manager based out of Pune was heavily pregnant, because she felt too awkward to tell us. She didn't discuss things like that with the client. We didn't know until she went on maternity leave, and we had no cover at all. And there's just odd little things. You miss out on all that, coffee machine chit chat and the pop by someone's desk for a moment. So you get in the habit of, instead of an email, make a quick phone call, just 30 seconds. Hey, do you know about so-and-so? And just exactly as you say, in meetings, just encourage a bit more interpersonal stuff, and just take a moment whenever you're delivering information, encourage people in the group to look, I can't tell by your faces on the video cam or on the conference call how this is going down. Take a moment, be open, be honest, tell me how you're feeling about it, even if you hate it. But let's have that conversation now, because I guarantee you we're going to end up having it at some point. It's better to have it now and get it out in the open.
So yeah. I know a lot of Agile obviously says that you've got to look at people over processes, but is there any tools that you used, Simon, to do you use Slack, do you use Teams, how do you get the collaboration and the kind of, I don't want to say banter because it's got negative connotations, but that kind of rapport building going?
To be honest, I'm less particular about any specific tool. I'm a big fan of video conferencing for certain meetings. I think it's something you can overuse. So we were talking about this briefly yesterday, is after a while you do get sick of sitting in one place just staring at a screen, trying to look interested and intelligent. When sometimes you just want to go for a walk and wave your arms around and away chatting to people. But I think particularly something like Scrum, where you're doing the planning sessions, the product owner reviews and the retrospectives, is having that face-to-face. Again, at least it gives you some sense of how people are feeling. Do they look stressed and harassed, that kind of thing. But for me, it is just about over-communication. It's pick the phone up in the odd moments. Oh, we haven't spoken for a couple of days. How you doing? Something like that, just to try and keep that. I saw something flash up. Somebody said about Agile is very big on osmotic communication. It's a very human connection approach. And so you just need to try and do that extra bit to stay connected with your team.
Yeah, sure. Did you mention that the company you work for had a base in Amsterdam as well?
No,
sorry,
not mine.
That was Sean. Sorry.
Yeah, we do. Yeah.
So how do you manage people and that kind of communication with your team in Amsterdam, or are they completely separate?
For the time being, they're somewhat separate. I mean, it's different if you're. I think if you're in a senior position, you collaborate a lot more, but the integration occurs more at the strategic level rather than. There is collaboration between teams, but I'm not involved in any groups or missions or that involve that collaboration. One thing I just sort of add to Simon's point that somebody said to me that's really stuck with me over the last couple of months: technology is your friend right now. And whatever tools you're using, leveraging the technology and what's available to communicate is something that we're trying to achieve. And how you create presence and awareness in teams using that technology, I think, can be define a lot as how effective you are in sort of the role that you're in, whether it's a coach or an engineering manager or some role that's involving teams. I agree with dialing up communication as much as possible, but what I've also found is because it all occurs over technology, it feels a bit like you're flying a plane with no sight and you're just using the controls in front of you. Sometimes it can get too much. So, I've actually dialed down some of my communication, or at least gotten rid of some of the stuff that's not as important or that I would consider wasteful, and just focused on the stuff that really matters to me. So it's dialed up communication, but also it's made me kind of weed stuff out that isn't that important from a day-to-day point of view.
I just saw a comment from someone saying that they do a lot of home-based working. One of the things it's reinforced is just how much they like being in the office. Well, one of the things I think really rings true about that is I absolutely. So I've done a lot of remote working, and you can't just pop out to India or Moscow. But at the same time, sometimes there is no substitute for some level of face-to-face. And I think I genuinely don't know how it will go exactly, but I guess there's some kind of risk balancing going to be needed, where every now and again you're going to want to try and get people together if you can. You know, just that connection. I think I was mentioning something again on a call yesterday, where in some ways there's no substitute for being in a room, waving your arms around and scribbling things on the walls. That often is the way you kind of break the back of a problem or an idea.
Yeah.
I mean, that's something that just used to, is that, or is that something that we because
Yeah,
we've always done it like that, or with the newer generation in a post-COVID, people who are just coming into companies, are they just going then their new norm's going to be not in an office? Because I've been doing this 20 years and I love going to the office, even if it means travel. I love sitting in a room with a bunch of people I'm trying to deliver a thing with, and going over to their desk and having those conversations. But the new generation coming in, especially to tech businesses, are they just going to get used to working on WhatsApp groups or Teams or Slack or whatever?
Yeah, quite possibly. I think if anything for them, it may be the bigger challenge is finding a work-life stopping point.
Yeah.
Because if you're working from home and you've got that, especially where people are spread out, where again that shift work with kids at the moment, where some people are morning, some people are afternoon, it's really easy to let that sprawl out across a large part of your life.
Yep, absolutely.
Simon, just on that point, it's a really, really valid point. I used to be the Slack police, just for a bit of fun, but because I work with global teams, I used to go, "Hi, what you do? Why are you working so late? That's the time zone. And is there an issue?" And the guys just used to. We used to make a bit of a laugh and a joke about it, but actually, since my workforce has been working remotely, I've actually had to have a chat with a couple of senior engineers, because I'm like, "Oh, it's bank holiday today. Is there something wrong?" "Oh no, Mark, I just want to get it done. No worries." So they're conscious that Big Brother is watching them, and it's all a little bit of fun, but actually. Having the physical, I'm leaving off the removed. There's a lot of scope for people overworking. So that's a really, really good point you've raised there. So.
Yeah, and actually really support what you've just said. I think that's one of the key responsibilities of a manager is you are responsible for the welfare of your team. And I think what you just said is really, really important. It's just actively discouraged. Look, don't overwork yourself. You're no good to me if you're overworked. You're no good to yourself. Just I completely agree with what you said.
Yeah, and just to that's something I've experienced a lot is just the simplicity of people taking effective breaks can make a big difference. I think people, managers kind of wonder what's going on with their staff when they can't see them. But I think also staff feel like they need to really outperform or work longer hours, and they tend to do when they work from home. And this continuous integration of work and home life, I think, has created a lot of challenges for people over the last few months, where there's very much a productivity mindset that I need to work 8 hours, 10 hours every day nonstop, and not really take effective breaks where you disconnect from the work. And people are still kind of very much thinking around, being productive rather than doing value-added work. And it's quite important to maintain your innovation, energy levels, and creativity by sort of managing your flow of work throughout the course of the day, I think. So me going and making coffee, but still thinking about work and thinking about the next meeting I'm in, isn't really taking a break. Maybe being in the garden or going for a walk for 5 minutes, or taking a meeting while I'm walking outside, just to change that mindset and context, I think is a little bit more effective than we're probably doing, at least for the most part that I've experienced, where people are really struggling to take effective breaks and create some slack in their day so that they can continue to be innovative, continue to be creative, and continue to do value-added work.
Yeah. So just a quick question that I've had from Andrew Risk. He was just asking, obviously, with at the moment the whole team is working remotely in most places. He wanted to ask, how do you think Agile is going to be best used when that is happening? So at the moment he's using daily scrums, which he thinks is very effective. But from your guys' perspective, how do you think that's going to continue working?
So in terms of complete remote working using an agile approach.
Yeah.
So if he's using scrums, I've delivered projects, as I said, with essentially 100% remote working teams, and it makes no difference in terms of actual delivery. I think it's what everyone's been talking about, though, in terms of getting that rapport and also making sure that you have a healthy work-life balance. You can the Scrum principles are going to be the same if you're sitting next to someone or if you're on a video chat, and it works. I just found it a lot more difficult to sort of get people motivated and sort of go through the motions, because I couldn't just go for a coffee with them and ask them how their family was doing, or get a better understanding as to they're going on holiday or what are their worries and things. It had to be quite process driven, and putting people before process, I think, is a key thing for the agile delivery. But it is completely doable from my experience. I don't know what the rest of the panel thinks.
Same as Ben. Yeah.
Yeah.
Don't really have an issue with it. The only thing I have found two things I've found really useful, more than perhaps when it's in an office environment, is the Scrum of Scrums. That has been really, really useful. So getting the wider organisation involved in what we're doing, so keeping everybody aligned. And funnily enough...
Sorry, Mark, could you just expand on the Scrum of Scrums? Because I don't think that is necessarily within the Scrum framework, is it?
It's not. I've actually added it about 2 months ago, and it's actually proven its worth now. What we do is we have the heads of each project team or somebody of influence meet twice a week, listening for blockers, issues, any dependencies across the teams, and it's also for non-technical teams as well, just to make everybody aware of what actually everybody else is doing. Most definitely not a town hall, so not like an organisational announcement. It's basically a delivery coordination meeting across the whole organisation.
Nice.
And that's gone really well. My heart was in my mouth the first time we did it over Teams, and it actually proved to be really, really good.
Do you document that at all? Do you sort of have an agenda?
Yeah,
which you
totally. Yeah, it's got an agenda. I take I facilitate, or someone else, manager will run it following the agenda. And then the interesting thing is that we compile all the notes and leave it as an update for the whole department, so everybody kind of knows each other's business. It sounds really burdensome, but it's not. But that's one of the things that's really proved its worth. And then also the sprint reviews, so the showcases, we'll be recording them. The guys will record what they've done, and that will go out to the key stakeholders. And perhaps we might have paid a little bit lip service to that before lockdown, but if anything, that's really, really important now, when it comes to managing expectations regarding what we're delivering. So that's been a bit of a benefit, of us working remotely.
Yeah. No, I think that's it's a really, really good point. I generally tend to try and encourage quite a disciplined approach to something like Scrum. Especially in less mature teams that have only been running for a year or two, is stick with the method, do each of the steps and each of the sessions for their intended purpose, and don't start freestyling. And I think that lends itself quite well again to this sort of situation. You all get together at the same times, you've got a stated purpose for the session, and exactly as you said, if you've got something up on the screen as a shared document, you document the agreement as you go, right there in front of everybody. You get the agreement, and then you're done and you move on. But what you're doing over time is you've built up a really, really solid body and record of exactly what you've agreed, exactly what you've done, why you've done it, and that's your traceability then for requirements, etc., for whatever level you're at.
So Simon, have you seen sort of less mature Scrum teams freestyling, and sort of how you had to pull that back ball?
Yeah, for quite a while, and I think it's less nowadays, but you still get it a bit, is when you mention Agile in certain organisations, you get this pained expression. And what's happened is they've not done Agile. They've had a lot of people who've used the terminology. So my favourite one is, we're under Agile. Okay, is it Scrum or Kanban? Blank look.
Blank.
Who's your product owner? We didn't bother with that. Okay, then you're not really running it.
Yeah.
And you have to just sort of rewind a little bit. The appetite's there. The people are all very up for it. but there's been a tendency to kind of pick and choose bits that they like. And for me, it's a little bit like a card game. If you start discarding rules, the whole thing kind of falls apart a bit.
I mean, yeah, I've seen in a lot of companies' proposals that they're agile, and you know, when you do quiz them and you say, okay, what processes are you using? As you say, you just get this kind of completely blank look where they go, well, this means that we can change quickly, and you're like, that's not really the thing. So I guess, Sean, from your experience, have you got any sort of feedback about the agile in the post-COVID?
So in terms of agile and currently, I very much, as a coach, will focus on instilling values and principles into a team, and then allow the team to develop their own practices. And that's been quite useful, I think, at the minute. So I don't mind whether they're doing Scrum or Kanban or anything else, but my focus is, you know, so I'll ask them, okay, so how are you going to dial up communication or simplicity? How are you going to achieve delivery parity? And that's led to some quite innovative, creative solutions where, for example, a lot of my teams will have what we call a breakfast lounge call every morning, where they jump on between 8 and 9, a video on call, and they, you know, it's some of them are having breakfast, some of them are doing emails, but it's a way to get the day going, and then they'll sort of develop things as we go from there. So very much focus on the values and principles of Agile, and then allowing the teams to develop their own practices, particularly given the sort of, you know, completely different way of working, to work from home in this environment versus in the office. And the other thing that I will typically do is we have what's called daily retrospectives. So we'll reflect daily on how things are going. We look at what's gone well today, what could we do differently in the next 24 hours if it was an experiment, and that really empowers the team to own their own ways of working and drive that forward, so that they can then deliver for stakeholders. And that I found that quite powerful. I think it's something that has to be coached and understood well, but dial up that feedback loop and keeping the main thing, right, which is the customer and feedback, delivering value, focusing on, you know, how we create this value stream into our customers or consumers' hands, as opposed to get task A done by deadline B within budget C. Not really focusing on that value-driven stream that has to happen, where you make
understanding why something's done rather than exactly as you say.
Yeah, and that's quite important. Why is important. A lot of people do Scrum, they do practices, but they do not understand why. The cargo cults and sacred cows, and they're just copying what other people are doing rather than discovering some of these things for themselves, which in turn empowers them to develop them, to own them, and to ultimately deliver and satisfy what the stakeholders need. So
I think that leads on nicely to, I think, Barbara's question about setting up you know, a new agile team remotely and what are the gotchas. And I think the two key points for me was the why, why are we doing this? And I think essentially the other one is just always being a leader. So even if you can't be bothered doing the stand up when you really don't feel like it because you didn't get any sleep the night before for whatever reason, it's just always leading from the front and going, right, we're going to do the stand up. Come on, everyone. Trying to get everybody to to be on time, be consistent, don't be late, making sure that the team are always understanding why you're doing things and getting buy-in from them. I don't know, I struggled at first. It took me 3 months for my Umbraco team, who I was specifically implementing Agile into, to at 9:30 get up from their desks, go to the meeting room, and start working, in the stand-up. And I think my perspective is, you've just got to make sure that you're constantly doing it and going, this is why we're doing it. This is the benefit you're going to get to yourselves, and never be late. So I don't know what anyone else's sort of experiences and sort of doing it even remotely, because I don't think it differs remotely to doing it physically, to be honest.
No, I think for me, probably one of the biggest issues I've seen over and over again is a lack of either product owner or a lack of commitment from the product owner. If you do training sessions, it's very, very common that you get the Scrum Master and the team are in the training sessions. The product owner is kind of tacked on later. And one of the most effective things for me is whenever you do the sort of initial kickoff sessions and sometimes training sessions, is make sure the product owner's in there, don't let them off the hook for their commitment. They absolutely, it's not a particularly onerous burden. It's, I've worked it out, something like 3.5 hours per, say, fortnight sprint or something like that. But they owe you that every single day for the stand-ups, for those sessions. And if they start worming out with it, you're kind of a bit lost, because they are meant to be the key decision maker for what you do. And what I found is when you do that properly, it's actually often them delivering the progress report to their own people, and them justifying why they chose to do this and go this way. Yeah. Whereas if you let them wander away from you, then you're just another delivery team.
Yeah, I think my best projects are ones where I've had the product owner fully engaged. And, you know, I delivered a project for Aldermore Bank, and they had their own product owner who came and, you know, was involved in the backlog grooming, and they were involved in any of the other ceremonies. And I think you've nailed it there. I've not considered that. Absolutely make sure that that key person's involved, because they can sort of float away after the first couple of sessions that you do.
Yeah. For me, especially with something like Waterfall, there's a traditional relationship where the customer retains the customer role, and they get to be unhappy with what's been done.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can deliver it to them at the end, and even if it was technically what they did ask for, they can sort of go, oh no, that's not, because they can read the room on their side and think people are unhappy. Product owner ties them properly in, and it means they've got skin in the game. They're forced to defend their own decisions and become their own champion for what you're doing, and it completely changes the relationship, and I think massively for the better.
So key message there for Barbara is make sure that with your remote team that all of the team are involved in the relevant ceremonies that need to be in, be it remotely or not remotely.
Yeah.
Sure. Sorry, go on.
No, sorry. Just with you talking there, Ben, about a project you've worked on previously, we've had to have a question, which is, you know, is quite an open one for all of you, just more about based on your experience, really. So it's just more of, have any of you actually ever been in a situation with delivery where you've used Agile and actually regretted it? And would that still be the case if it was the same in post-COVID?
I've had some terrible experiences with waterfall delivery, which is why we moved in the agency from waterfall to Agile. And although, don't get me wrong, Agile doesn't always go well. You know, Scrum isn't always perfect. People don't always know do when they're meant to do it. It gives you that transparency to fix issues that are going to come along anyway earlier on, rather than, you know, as Simon just said, at the end of a project where clients going, that's not what we wanted, and even though it was what they agreed, it makes sure that everybody sees what's happening, and you can change it. So stuff goes wrong with Agile projects, don't get me wrong, but you can fix them a lot quicker, and that's been my experience.
I think from my point of view, I don't know about regret, but one of the biggest challenges, and one that, to be honest, I've not fully cracked even now, is there's a reporting disconnect. From the really top senior level, there's by necessity a general mentality of what are we building, how much is it going to cost, and when's it going to be ready? And Waterfall really, really neatly fits that model, and it's what they're used to. Mm-hmm. The more exploratory nature of Agile, I think, is just fundamentally better from a delivery perspective, but it can be a real challenge to try and communicate that up to the top level, you know, to the people that are actually paying for the effort, in a way that they understand, because a lot of the time they won't sit still for the sort of couple of hours it might take to actually educate. They're used to just a couple of bullet lines on a list of about 80 different projects, and it is a tough one. It's a tough one, that one. It's just, I think time will eventually improve that.
Simon, just on that, that's why I mentioned before that I actually do like a little bit of waterfall. That really is key insofar as delivery using Scrum. You know, it is relentless. It's something that I really enjoy, but it's the so what at the end of it.
Yeah.
And what I've been at pains to do, I certainly did it at Disney and I do it at Car Finance, is every fortnight I'll send a PowerPoint that basically lets the CEOs know how the projects have actually performed against the sprint goals, you know, what the ad hocs were, what the blockers were, did they deliver what they set out to achieve, and more importantly, are they aligned against the current roadmap? And I do that. And I honestly, since I started doing it about 4 or 5 months ago, I'm really glad that I did, because that goes up. They'll make remarks on it. Sometimes I deliver it in person, but more importantly, I also send that back down as well once the board's had a look at it. So all the guys and girls actually see, one, the value in the work they're doing, but two, they realise that actually there's people that are really, really interested in it. And over the period of months, I've actually seen an improvement across the technical department just in what they're delivering, because you know it's not disappearing into the ether. So yeah, it is a bit waterfall, but it's a necessary evil.
I think my answer to that is it depends on the understanding of Agile within the organization and the team.
Mm-hmm.
Quite often there are quote implementations where I don't really feel like Agile is understood particularly well. And, you know, there's this debate between sort of project management versus product ownership and managing value and enhancing that value stream for the business, as opposed to blindly just kind of focusing on getting something done, hoping that it is what the customer wants. So I think, you know, if you put the customer first, if you can create an environment where you put the customer in the room, whether you're in the office or remote, and you can follow that through, and you can dial up those feedback and communication and incorporate them. And, you know, Agile doesn't really have a lot of planning up front, because you are looking to build those initial MVPs, get immediately feedback from the customer, and then you incorporate that feedback into the next release cycle. So if you're doing the simple things, I haven't seen it work badly, but I've seen bad implementations that worked badly. So typically I'll walk into a situation and there'll be fundamental cracks that this isn't really Agile. We're not really understanding that value-driven, customer-focused, you know, that just one statement that progress is working software. Most Agile shops they'll say that, but if you look under the hood and you look at what they're doing, they're not really reflecting that progress is working software. So
it's a bit of a sort of square peg in a round hole feel to it sometimes, I think.
Yeah, but at the same time, you know, there are constraints that are difficult to align with Agile. You know, so my company is on the stock exchange, NASDAQ listed. We have to forecast what we're planning to do over the next 12 months because that's what people invest in. So how do you do that in a world where you don't necessarily do a lot of upfront planning, and you have to, you know, you're very much based on customer feedback, and that's difficult, and that's a problem that I'm trying to think through at the minute. So I think you know, there are things that are going to evolve, and we need to think about whether is Agile fundamentally broken? Are the values and by that I'm really referring to the values and principles. Are we missing something, or is Agile a piece of the puzzle of a much bigger picture that we need to consider? You know, other people have looked at things like beyond budgeting and sociocracy and stuff like that. And are those the things that we're missing to really say that we've got an Agile organization or not? I don't know. But I do think in a couple of years we'll be very different from where we're at right now. And that's part of being Agile, right? It's part of it's being flexible and allowing things to evolve. So
I would actually stress again the product owner relationship. It doesn't, you're absolutely right with your longer term budgeting. That is a huge challenge. But in the shorter term, there's a lot of power in having someone from effectively their side of the fence who's able to say, I'm really close to this and I'm very happy with it. In the short term, in the ongoing short term, that can be very, very helpful in just sort of calming people down and helping feel that, yeah, no, we are doing the right thing. We don't fully get it when this isn't what we used to see it. But clearly, yeah, this guy's defending it. He's usually been the one that's chucking the grenades. So yeah, there's a lot of value in that in the short term, at least, I think.
Excellent. Thanks for that. So obviously we're coming up to the end, but we've got one last question that I think will sort of end it all nicely. So David O'Hagan has just asked, is Agile ever the only method employed in a specific delivery, or is there always a waterfall wrapper around Agile?
That's a good one. Personally speaking, so if we say Agile, Scrum, for instance, doesn't fit everything. If your main job is, say, technological change where you're moving data from this platform to that platform, it's a repetitive exercise. You're just going through it over and over and over again. Kanban can work quite well for that, or you're perfectly fine with something like Waterfall. It's a defined output goal. You know what you need to get and when you need to do it by. Scrum's best where you're trying to build something to perform a function, I think, and the quality is really important because the delivery team are never going to understand the quality and the why of it as well as the customer. So that kind of engagement works best. I think it's a kind of horses for courses thing for me.
I want to throw in something. So to me, Agile is, about not just accommodating change, but embracing it. If you know up front and you can guarantee that nothing is going to change, you don't really need to use Agile. But that's just not the nature of software development. And it's typically not the nature of the relationship between an organization and a customer either. You typically go to the customer and they don't know what they want. They might present you with a business problem and you have to build some software that actually matters to their product domain that makes their life easier in their organization. So that the nature of that problem is typically you are going to have change and it's typically going to be constant. So Agile works for that. But if you've got a situation like I think what you just described there, Simon, where you can guarantee this is not going to change, then I think you can question whether you're not using Agile. But to me, that's just not the nature of software development.
I think you're right, Sean. I think if your delivery is going to be any more than 2 sprints and you're trying to use Waterfall, something changes within those sprints all the time. So Waterfall and Agile doesn't necessarily even talk about budgets. So a lot of people talk about having a fixed budget. I mean, you can have a fixed budget with an Agile delivery. You're just using time and materials and go, this is what we're going to use. So yeah. I think you're completely right. If you're going to do something more than 4 weeks long, something will change. Somebody's customer will decide that something's not right, or a business case will change. And that's where I think ultimately Simon's point about having the product owner involved, so he's not just reading the feelings of somebody in the room who isn't happy, and they can be involved right the way through it.
Yeah.
Excellent.
I was going to say, from my point of view, if I never got to use Waterfall again, I don't think I'd lose any sleep at all. If I never got to use Agile again, I'd be pretty upset.
How about you, Mark? Do you agree with the others, or?
Yeah, I do. I love Scrum. I do. Agile, we do need to have a look at it. It's not just going to be a case of us rolling back and just taking everything as is. The list on the left, and the list on the right, they do need looking at. We can't just go back in how we did before and expect everything to be the same. I am an advocate of both, but equally tempered with a bit of connect to the board. Unfortunately, I live Waterfall, and you can keep them engaged. Product owners, yeah, really, really seriously important, perhaps now more than ever. We want to make sure we're delivering the right things under the constraints that we're all currently under. That's important. But I do believe a little bit of Waterfall, a little bit of reporting, portfolio level at the ends of the board keeps them sweet as well. And last but not least, if you can, I used to do this a lot at Disney. I used to invite VPs, etc., to our showcases. I was a bit evil like that. So I'd say to one of the project teams, oh, by the way, such and such body's accepted the invite for your showcase. And then suddenly your sprint burn downs, they're amazing and they're massively on point. The showcases as well, the sprint reviews. So you could bring people in that way in a little bit more of an agile manner.
No, perfect. Well, thank you for all that. Thanks for everyone's questions. I guess just from the panel side, is there any sort of final points or any final key takeaways you want to sort of add just quickly?
Yeah, what I'd say is if anyone is thinking of trying to introduce an agile way of working, remotely or not, try it. You're not necessarily going to succeed the first time, but persevere. The difference I felt in my team's morale and them working together is massive. So absolutely give it a go. Start small. Don't necessarily do it right the way through the organization. Start with a small team like I did and then replicate through it. But I think it's all about the like Sean was talking, explain why and make sure that people understand what you're doing, why you're doing it.
Yeah, I definitely echo that. Start small. I think the biggest challenge I had is the instincts that you've built up over time working with something like waterfall don't really count anymore, and it can feel a little bit nervous, especially as from the manager or the scrum master point of view. So it can help sometimes having something with relatively low stakes while you introduce and learn the method. But once you've got a hold of it, you will fly.
Excellent. Sean, any, obviously from your side, any sort of last key comment or?
I mean, at the minute, I would just put your teams first, and empower them, and they will take ownership, let them self-organize, let them, and they will deliver from there. And just for me, it's about the values and principles, and allow the teams to develop the practices so that they can deliver to stakeholders.
Excellent. And then Mark, anything else from yourself or?
Yeah, just very quickly. So I've got quite a few decent project teams, self-organising. I trust them. I really do trust them. When we go back on mass, the first thing I'm going to be looking for is the absence of a normal. What I mean by that is, I'll use Phil for example. Phil delivers 5 story points a day. It's everything done brilliantly. I'll be looking to see if there's any changes, because I'm not going to take anything for granted with the guys and girls when I go back. And more importantly, any new changes that I think are amazing, will most certainly be delivering the why behind it. So I think with the current situation, communications and high quality communications are really, really important, And to stop being bored, for me being boring, I actually do give people a shout and just not talk about work. So I think task, team, individual, and being able to have decent, genuine conversations with people that are working remotely as individuals is really, really important, just for the relationship building as well.
No, excellent. No, well, yeah, thank you for them final comments for everybody. I just want to say thank you for everyone that's commented over in the webinar chat as well. I think that's really helped stimulate some of the discussion, and obviously your questions and sort of contribution to the discussion has been really interesting. I've been reading through and obviously trying to understand it from my side. So really thank you for obviously everyone taking the time out. I think obviously we've covered quite a few topics today, and we've clearly only scratched the surface when it comes to sort of delivery and how that's going to look like over the next sort of few months. So hopefully you've all sort of taken away something from this, something new, a new idea, something that you can really take back and use in your own sort of skill set. But no, so thank you for everybody. Thanks Sean, Ben, Simon, Mark, for obviously, being the spokespeople and, being the faces on the cameras and leading the discussions and, using your own experiences. Really appreciate it. And just a final from me, we will be obviously sending you guys out a feedback form, so please be as honest as possible. Any questions that you have on there or any sort of ideas for a next webinar, please do let us know, and we can hopefully put something together sometime soon with some of you guys as well. But that's everything from me. I guess, does anyone have anything else or any other final questions? No. Perfect. Well, thanks everybody, and yeah, we'll all catch up soon at some point if I speak to you anyway, and then please drop me an email if you need anything.
Thanks, guys.
Perfect. Thanks everybody.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.